Jump into a story that's all made up, filled with fun surprises and wild adventures that come straight from the imagination. This tale is completely fictional, taking you on a journey where anything can happen. Get ready to explore and enjoy a world where the only limit is how big we can dream. Emma and Nathan's love story began 12 years ago in the fall of 2010. At a networking event in Nashville, Emma, a bright-eyed real estate intern, had been assigned the task of selling raffle tickets. Nathan, fresh out of graduate school and working at a tech startup, was immediately drawn to her infectious laughter and ambitious spirit. Their courtship was a whirlwind filled with coffee dates, weekend hikes, and long discussions about their dreams for the future. Emma admired Nathan's intellect and drive, while Nathan was captivated by Emma's determination and zest for life. Within a year, they were engaged, and 6 months later, they exchanged vows in a picturesque ceremony overlooking the mountains. The early years of their marriage were marked by a shared dedication to their careers. Emma threw herself into her real estate career, quickly rising through the ranks at her firm. Her natural charm, combined with her keen eye for property potential, made her a favorite among clients. She had an exceptional knack for matching families with their dream homes, bringing her both professional success and personal satisfaction. Nathan's career in software engineering flourished alongside Emma's. His innovative problem-solving skills caught the attention of industry leaders, and soon he found himself in high demand. Late nights spent coding transitioned into leadership roles and keynote speaking engagements at tech conferences. As their careers thrived, so did their personal lives. They purchased a home in Oakwood Estates, a spacious 4-bedroom house that Emma had instantly fallen in love with. Weekends were spent renovating, decorating, and transforming the house into a home that reflected their shared tastes and aspirations. To the outside world, Emma and Nathan appeared to have it all. They hosted dinner parties where Emma's culinary skills took center stage, while Nathan's dry humor kept their guests entertained. They traveled to exotic destinations, sharing enviable photos of sunsets in Bali and skiing in the Swiss Alps. Their social media accounts were a curated highlight reel of their seemingly perfect life. As the years passed, subtle cracks began to form in Emma and Nathan's once solid foundation. The long hours they devoted to their respective careers left little time for the passion that had once defined their relationship. Conversations about starting a family were repeatedly postponed, with both citing the need to achieve just one more professional milestone before taking that step. Still, they soldiered on, convinced that their love and shared history would be enough to weather any storm. Neither Emma nor Nathan could have predicted the storm that was about to engulf their lives, threatening everything they had built together. Clara Maroney's arrival in Oakwood brought a fresh energy to the neighborhood. At 33, Clara was starting over after a painful divorce, determined to rebuild her life on her own terms. With her infectious laugh and free-spirited nature, Clara stood out among the more conservative residents of the suburb. It was Emma who first reached out to Clara, dropping by with a welcome basket filled with local treats and a bottle of wine. The two women hit it off immediately, bonding over their shared love of art and travel. Emma, who had always harbored a secret desire to be more creative, was fascinated by Clara's stories of teaching art to middle schoolers and her own artistic endeavors. As winter melted into spring, Clara became a regular visitor to Emma and Nathan's home. She and Emma spent weekends exploring local galleries or trying out new recipes in Emma's gourmet kitchen. Nathan, initially content to let the women have their girl time, found himself increasingly drawn into their conversations, especially when Clara discussed the latest exhibits at the museum where she volunteered. Clara's presence breathed new life into Emma and Nathan's social circle. Her quick wit and adventurous spirit added a spark to their dinner parties. She introduced the couple to new restaurants, encouraged them to attend outdoor concerts, and even convinced the usually reserved Nathan to try salsa dancing. For Emma, Clara represented the freedom she had never allowed herself. She admired her friend's ability to rebuild her life after divorce, to chase her passions without fear of judgment. In Clara, Emma saw an alternate path, a life filled with spontaneity and far less concern for the expectations of others. Nathan, too, found himself looking forward to Clara's visits. Her fresh outlook on art and culture sparked new conversations, a welcome departure from the work-related discussions that now dominated dominated his and Emma's marriage. Clara had an easy way of drawing Nathan out, helping him view the world with a different lens. None of them realized that this friendship was quietly setting the stage for a betrayal that would unravel their lives. The affair began on a warm evening in late April. Emma was out of town at a real estate conference, and Nathan, not wanting to eat alone, invited Clara over for dinner. As they sat together, sipping wine and watching the sunset, something shifted between them. Clara, emboldened by the wine and the intimate setting, began sharing the pain of her failed marriage. She spoke of feeling unloved, unappreciated, and ultimately discarded. Nathan, drawn in by her vulnerability, found himself opening up as well, his frustrations about the long hours, the focus on career over their personal lives, and the slow fading of intimacy between him and Emma. In that moment of shared vulnerability, their eyes met, and the unspoken tension that had been simmering finally ignited. The first kiss was tentative, almost shy, but quickly deepened into something far more urgent and undeniable. Guilt warred with desire, but in the end, desire triumphed. That night marked the beginning of their secret affair. In the weeks that followed, Nathan and Clara constructed a web of lies to hide their relationship. They stole moments whenever they could, lunches in quiet parks, fabricated work events that allowed for out-of-town rendezvous, and early morning meetings that were actually stolen moments together in Clara's art studio. The affair brought a renewed sense of excitement into both Emma and Nathan's lives. For Nathan, Clara represented the passion and spontaneity he felt had been missing from his life with Emma. He reveled in Clara's artistic nature, captivated by how she found beauty in the everyday. For Clara, Nathan offered stability and intellectual stimulation, a sharp contrast to her ex-husband's volatility and lack of interest in her work. Yet, even as they basked in their newfound connection, the weight of their deception pressed down heavily. There were close calls, like a lipstick stain hastily wiped from Nathan's collar or a text message not deleted in time. Unexplained absences required increasingly complex lies to cover their tracks. One particularly close call came during a neighborhood barbecue. While Emma chatted with the other guests, Nathan and Clara found themselves alone in the kitchen. Unable to resist, they shared a passionate kiss, only to spring apart at the sound of approaching footsteps. It was Dominic, stopping by to refill his drink. He gave them a curious look but said nothing, leaving Nathan and Clara to wonder if he had seen anything. As spring turned into summer, their affair intensified. Nathan and Clara began to speak in whispers about a future together, even as guilt gnawed at them. They knew they were playing with fire, but neither seemed able or willing to stop. Little did they know that their carefully constructed house of lies was about to collapse. The first sign that something was wrong came to Emma on a sunny Saturday morning in early June. She had woken early, planning to surprise Nathan with breakfast in bed, only to find his side of the bed empty and cold. His running shoes were by the door, but his car was gone from the driveway. When Nathan returned an hour later, flushed and slightly out of breath, he claimed he had gone for a long run and then driven to pick up fresh bagels. Emma nodded, accepting his explanation, but a small seed of doubt had been planted. In the weeks that followed, Emma began to pick up on subtle changes in Nathan's behavior. He seemed unusually thoughtful, bringing her flowers without any particular reason, and proposing spontaneous date nights. Yet, despite these gestures, he often appeared distracted, his mind elsewhere, with his phone always close by, as if waiting for an important message. Nathan's work schedule also became increasingly unpredictable. He started coming home later, often blaming deadlines or for last-minute meetings. But when Emma mentioned his late nights to one of Nathan's colleagues at a party, the colleague's confusion was immediate. Work had been relatively slow lately, nothing demanding late hours. There were other small signs that gnawed at Emma. One evening, when she leaned in to kiss him, she caught the faint scent of an unfamiliar perfume. When she asked about it, Nathan laughed it off, claiming he must have picked it up in a crowded elevator at the office. Emma tried to brush off her concerns, telling herself she was just overthinking things. After all, this was Nathan, the man she had built her life with and trusted completely. But the doubt lingered, quietly growing in the back of her mind. She started paying closer attention to the way Nathan acted, noticing how his eyes lit up when Clara entered the room and how their conversations seemed to exclude everyone else. Emma tried to convince herself it was nothing. After all, Clara was a friend, but a small voice inside her warned that there might be something more. As June progressed, Emma's unease only deepened. She began to check Nathan's phone when he left it unattended, or scroll through his emails when his laptop was open. She knew it was a breach of his privacy, but the need to uncover the truth overpowered her guilt. Even though she feared what she might find, she couldn't stop. Finally, unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, Emma made up her mind. she would follow Nathan and discover what he was hiding once and for all. Little did Emma know that her world was about to shatter. On the blistering afternoon of June 14th, her suspicions reached a breaking point. Nathan had casually mentioned over breakfast that he had a late meeting and wouldn't be home for dinner. Something in his tone, or perhaps the months of mounting doubt, pushed Emma to make a quick call to his office. What she learned confirmed her worst fears. There was no meeting scheduled. With her heart pounding and palms slick with sweat, Emma decided to follow Nathan. She called in sick to work, something she had never done before, and parked her car a block away from their home. As Nathan's car pulled out of the driveway, Emma followed at a safe distance, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. To her surprise, Nathan didn't head into the city. Instead, he drove to a quiet, tree-lined street on the other side of town. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she recognized where they were going. A sick feeling churned in her stomach as she watched Nathan park his car and walk briskly up to Clara's front door. Clara answered almost immediately, pulling Nathan inside with a smile that Emma could see even from down the street. The door closed, and Emma sat in her car, frozen with shock. She had suspected, yes, but to witness it with her own eyes was something else entirely. The reality of it hit harder than she had imagined. Unable to bear the thought of what was happening behind that door, Emma shakily stepped out of her car. Her mind raced with confusion, anger, and betrayal as she approached Clara's house. Through a small gap in the living room curtains, she saw them, Nathan and Clara, locked in a passionate embrace, completely oblivious to the world outside. The sight hit Emma like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of her. She stumbled back, a strangled sob escaping her lips. In that instant, her entire world crumbled. Every memory, every dream they had shared, every promise of forever was now tainted, poisoned by the betrayal she had just witnessed. Blinded by tears, Emma staggered back to her car. She sat there for what felt like hours, alternating between heart-wrenching sobs and a numb disbelief, her mind unable to fully grasp the enormity of what she had just seen. When Emma finally drove home, her mind raced with a whirlwind of emotions. She couldn't confront Nathan yet. She needed time to think, to plan. But Clara, the thought of her former friend continuing her day, smug in her betrayal, made Emma's blood boil. Before she could stop herself, Emma found herself driving straight to Clara's house. She parked across the street and waited. When Clara stepped outside to water her garden, Emma was out of her car in an instant. Clara's eyes widened in surprise, quickly turning to fear as Emma approached, her face set in a mask of fury. What followed was a confrontation that would forever be etched into both women's memories, a storm of accusations, denials, and ultimately painful admissions. This confrontation would set in motion a chain of events leading to consequences neither could have predicted. In the days following her face-off with Clara, Emma moved through her life like a ghost. She went through the motions at work, forced a smile for the neighbors, and maintained a veneer of normalcy with Nathan. But inside, she was simmering, a cauldron of hurt and rage that threatened to boil over at any moment. Emma had chosen not to confront Nathan right away. She told herself she needed time to think, to figure out what she wanted to do next. But deep down, she knew the truth. She was plotting her revenge. The idea first came to her late one night as she lay in bed, listening to Nathan's steady breathing beside her. If he could betray her with her best friend, why shouldn't she do the same to him? The thought of hurting Nathan the way he had hurt her brought a grim smile to Emma's face, and she already knew exactly who she would use to execute her plan. Dominic Feldman, Nathan's best friend since college. Dominic had always been part of their lives, the perpetual bachelor who drifted from one casual relationship to the next. Emma had caught him looking at her with interest more than once over the years, though he had never acted on it out of loyalty to Nathan. But as Emma's plan took shape, she began to notice Dominic more closely. She saw how his eyes lingered on her when she wore something particularly flattering, and how he seemed to gravitate towards her in social situations. How Dominic always seemed to position himself near her at social events didn't escape Emma's notice. Yes, Dominic would be perfect for what she had in mind. Emma began orchestrating opportunities for the two of them to be alone. She asked for his help with minor household tasks when Nathan was out, and invited him over for coffee to discuss a new fitness plan. Each time, she turned up the charm. Her touches lingered just a little longer, her laughter a little too enthusiastic at his jokes. As she set her plan in motion, Emma felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. Soon, Nathan would know exactly how it felt to be betrayed by the two people he trusted the most. The potential damage to Dominic Dominic barely crossed her mind. She was consumed by her desire for revenge. What Emma didn't realize was that her meticulously crafted plan was about to backfire in the most unexpected way, setting off a series of events that would lead to tragedy. On a warm evening in late June, Emma decided it was time to put her plan into action. She invited Dominic over under the guise of needing help with a leaky faucet, knowing Nathan would be working late. When Dominic arrived, Emma answered the door in a silk robe, her hair tousled and a glass of wine in hand. Dominic raised an eyebrow slightly at her appearance, but kept his usual friendly composure. As he worked on fixing the faucet, Emma hovered close by, making conversation, laughing at his jokes, and finding excuses to brush up against him. When the job was done, she suggested they have a drink to cool off. She led him to the living room, sitting unusually close to him on the sofa. As they talked, Emma slowly steered the conversation toward relationships, expressing her dissatisfaction with the lack of passion in her marriage. She leaned in closer, her robe slipping open slightly. "Dominic, I've always wondered what it would be like between us," she murmured, her hand sliding onto his thigh. Dominic froze, his eyes wide with shock. Gently, but firmly, he removed her hand from his leg and put some distance between them on the couch. "Emma, what are you doing?" he asked, his voice a mix of confusion and concern. "You're my best friend's wife," Dominic repeated, but Emma refused to back down, desperation slipping into her voice. "Don't tell me you've never thought about it, Dominic. I've seen the way you look at me. We could keep it a secret. Nathan would never have to know." Dominic stood up abruptly, leaving Emma to watch helplessly as humiliation washed over her. She had been so certain that Dominic would be receptive, so sure her plan would work. As he reached the door, Dominic turned back, his expression a mixture of pity and disappointment. "I won't say anything to Nathan," he said quietly, "but I think you two need to talk." The door closed, leaving Emma alone with her shame and the bitter sting of her failed plan. She sank to the floor, tears of frustration and anger pouring down her face. How had it all gone so wrong? She hadn't wanted to cause more pain. She had only wanted Nathan to understand the depth of the hurt she felt. As the humiliation began to fade, a new fear took hold. Despite Dominic's assurance, Emma couldn't be certain he wouldn't tell Nathan what had happened. The thought of Nathan finding out, of him standing on the moral high ground despite his own betrayal, was more than she could bear. Little did Emma know that her worst fears were about to become reality, setting the stage for a confrontation that would change everything. The next evening, as Emma prepared dinner, she heard Nathan's car pull into the driveway. Her hands trembled slightly as she chopped the vegetables, wondering if tonight would be the night everything came crashing down. Nathan entered the house, his footsteps heavy, his greeting cold and distant. Emma's heart raced as he walked toward the kitchen. When she turned to face him, the look in his eyes confirmed her worst fear. Dominic had told him everything. "Emma, we need to talk," Nathan said, his voice tight with barely contained anger. "What the hell were you thinking, coming onto Dominic like that?" The knife fell from Emma's hand, clattering onto the cutting board. "How dare you stand there and judge me," she said, her voice shaking with rage, "when you've been sleeping with my best friend for months." Nathan's face turned pale, his anger quickly giving way to shock. "Did you think I was stupid? Did you think I wouldn't notice the late nights, the secret phone calls?" The argument escalated into a shouting match, years of pent-up resentment and frustration spilling out. They dredged up old arguments, rehashed past wounds, each determined to hurt the other as deeply as they themselves had been hurt. As their voices reached a fever pitch, Emma suddenly remembered the gun, the one Nathan had insisted they keep for protection, stored in a lockbox in the bedroom closet. In her rage and confusion, it seemed like the only solution to stop the pain. Without thinking, Emma sprinted upstairs, Nathan's confused voice calling after her. Her hands shook as she fumbled with the lockbox, pulling out the cold, heavy weapon. Nathan appeared in the doorway, his eyes widening in shock as he saw the gun in Emma's trembling hands. Emma, consumed by rage and blinded by pain, couldn't think clearly. All she could see was red, the red of her anger, the red of her shattered heart, the red of the future that had been stolen from her. Nathan stepped toward her, his hands raised in a calming gesture. "Emma, wait," he started, but her finger tightened on the trigger. The gunshot echoed through the house, followed by a suffocating silence. Emma stood frozen, the gun still in her hand, as Nathan crumpled to the floor. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled the room, mingling with the metallic scent of blood that quickly spread across the carpet. For a moment, Emma couldn't grasp what had happened. She stared at Nathan's body, waiting for him to get up, to shout at her, to move. But he didn't. He lay there, unmoving, a dark stain growing on his chest. Emma let out a piercing scream, collapsing beside him and gathering his lifeless body in her arms. She rocked back and forth, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the blood soaking through her clothes. In the distance, the sound of sirens grew louder. A neighbor must have heard the shot and called the police. Emma knew she should run, should try to hide what she had done, but she couldn't bring herself to leave Nathan's side. As the sirens grew louder, her mind raced through the events that had led her to this moment. The happy years of their marriage, the gradual drifting apart, the affair, her ill-conceived plan for revenge. It all seemed so insignificant now in the face of what she had done. The front door burst open downstairs, and Emma could hear the heavy footsteps of police officers entering the house. The once quiet home quickly became a hive of activity as law enforcement descended on the scene. Crime scene technicians meticulously combed through the house, snapping photographs and collecting evidence. The bedroom, with its blood-stained carpet and the discarded weapon, became the center of the investigation. Detective Eva Ramirez, a seasoned homicide investigator, was assigned to the case. She found Emma sitting in the living room, still in her blood-soaked clothes. Her eyes were vacant, and her responses monosyllabic, as though she was in a daze. Despite her state of shock, Emma was read her rights and taken into custody. At the police station, the initial numbness gave way to a torrent of emotion. Between sobs, Emma confessed to shooting Nathan, recounting in agonizing detail the events that had led up to that fateful moment. Detective Ramirez listened without interruption, her pen scratching across the notepad as Emma laid bare her story of betrayal, jealousy, and a plan for revenge that had gone horribly wrong. While Emma's statement was being recorded, other officers worked to piece together the puzzle. They interviewed neighbors who reported hearing the couple's argument escalate throughout the evening. Clara Maroney was brought in for questioning, her tear-streaked face a mask of guilt and grief as she admitted to her affair with Nathan. Dominic Feldman also provided his testimony, reluctantly sharing the details of Emma's failed seduction attempt and his conversation with Nathan afterward. His statement painted a picture of a marriage in crisis, pushed to its breaking point by infidelity and misunderstanding. Forensic evidence corroborated Emma's confession, cementing the tragic conclusion to a life once full of promise. Gunshot residue was found on Emma's hands, and the bullet from Nathan's body matched the gun that was registered in his name. Every day, the courtroom was filled with people curious to see the drama of love, betrayal, and murder unfold. The prosecutor described Emma as a woman filled with jealousy and rage who had carefully planned her revenge before turning to murder. She pointed out that Emma had first tried to seduce Dominic and then went to get the gun during the argument. Fiona Maroney's testimony was a key moment in the trial. She tearfully admitted to having an affair with Nathan and explained the damage it caused. Her guilt and sadness seemed to make some jurors feel sympathy for Emma, supporting the idea that she was a hurt wife pushed too far. Dominic Feldman's testimony was also important. He described how Emma had tried to seduce him, his voice showing his discomfort. However, he also talked about the strong love he had always seen between Emma and Nathan, suggesting that their actions were unusual for both of them. During the trial, Emma sat quietly at the defense table, her grief and regret clear to see. When she took the stand, her testimony was heartbreaking as she talked about how her marriage had fallen apart due to miscommunication and betrayal. She said she deeply regretted her actions and would trade places with Nathan if she could. 2 weeks later, at the sentencing, Judge Harriet Goodwin made her decision. She took into account Emma's lack of a criminal record and the situation of the crime. Emma was sentenced to 18 years in prison, with the chance for parole after 15 years. As Emma was led away in handcuffs, the sad end of what was once a happy marriage became final. The story of Emma and Nathan Hartley would be remembered in Oakwood, a reminder of how love can quickly turn to hatred and how betrayal can lead to terrible consequences.